talk about the document today.
Yes.
I presume you've got it there. Is that what you've got in those?
I do, yes, indeed.
What does it tell us?
What it tells us is that when Boris Johnson turned to the camera in that debate and said, we will not have the NHS on the table in trade negotiations, that was false, absolutely false. Because what we have here are all the 541 pages of exactly how the services provided in the NHS are on the table. There's, in effect, 4 ways in which...
Well, I hate to do this. I'm not going to go through all 4. You've made it clear the NHS, in your mind, is definitely on the table in any discussions with the American government in terms of a post-Brexit trade deal.
That's what those documents show.
OK, and they show them in the sense that this is written by the Americans in a wish list. Has any of it been agreed by the UK government?
Sorry, this is not American documents, right? There is a document, which is that one, which shows what the United States want as part of the negotiations. This is different. And you'll see that at the top of it, it says Department for International Trade.
So it's come from the department.
So it's actually come from the department. And we have the record, now the unexpurgated record, of the 6 occasions in which the department, and indeed, if you look at the very first meeting, and if I turn to the page which shows who was attending it, then we actually had, at that meeting, we had the Secretary of State at that first meeting.
And these are the result of those discussions. Is there anything in that document that's been signed off by the International Trade Department to say we've agreed?
They can't at the moment because under EU law we haven't yet left the European Union. What there is within the documents, they state very clearly that they're now at the level where they have final wordings to achieve the extension of patents for drugs, where they have the wording to achieve the ending of the National Institute for Clinical Excellence's capacity to control cost effectiveness in the health service, which would increase the cost that we pay, according to Professor Hill, from 18 to 45 billion for our drugs bill, because of that's the difference if we were paying American
the NHS is on the table. It may not be for sale in the sense that we're going to introduce a different system in terms of how we actually access services, but it is on the table.
Well, we haven't got the official line from the government yet on what they're saying on this report. I think what it does do is make life difficult for the Conservatives in terms of the fact that Donald Trump once suggested it was on the table, the NHS, then quickly backtracked. And you got the sense that between those two things happening, there was some nudging from the government. And you've seen Boris Johnson and others repeatedly say that it's not up for sale. I think that this all seems to relate to the cost of medicines and how that could impact it. And some others, but that's one part
there's
of it.
food labelling and other things.
Ways in which that
but I do think just on a political level, ultimately in this election, there are 2 issues which come up as the most important issue to voters, and they almost overtake each other depending. One's the NHS and one is Brexit. Now, clearly, if this does, pan out and it does put some mistrust, I think, on what the Tories are saying on the NHS, it has the potential to be an issue for them.
I'm just cursing Malcolm for saying he wanted politicians to write things down, because Katie and I have probably got to go away and read all of that afterwards. But I think what's interesting about this is that there's an interesting rebuttal to it, right, which is to say this is only a wish list by the Americans. But as far as this goes for the Conservatives, every day they're talking about whether or not the NHS is on the table is a day that they are losing. And for Jeremy Corbyn, every day that we're talking about whether or not the NHS is for sale, not about Labour's anti-Semitism problem, is a day that he is winning. And it would be a kind of great irony of this election if Boris Johnson was tanked by a claim that looked slightly whiffy, but was basically impossible to rebut without restating it, because that would be the £350 million on the bus all over again.
I mean, why is this called? I'm curious, as someone who, for years, I actually covered the pharmaceutical industry for years. I don't understand why this negotiating position is called putting the NHS on the table. Surely, if you are anticipating a different relationship with the EU, then one of the things you would do is have conversations with other people who are involved in this business. And one of the things that's interesting about the American pharmaceutical industry is that, yes, on-patent drugs are much more expensive, but off-patent drugs, which make up 95% of drug utilization, are far less expensive.
Exactly.
So there's an opportunity here, if the negotiation is done wisely, for the British taxpayer to save money and get access to better care. Now, do I think that would happen? I have no idea. I'm the outsider. I'm the Canadian here. But I don't think this is another case where I feel like we're all jumping ahead here. I think it would make much more sense for us to wait and see what the substance of these negotiations are. They could turn out any number of ways.
So you're scaremongering here, aren't you?
No, Malcolm's absolutely right to point out that generics are much cheaper. And what we do through the National Institute for Clinical Excellence is to ensure that drugs are coming off patent early so that we can get access to those generics. And of course, what we've also included in our manifesto is that we would be looking to set up a public body to create those generics to make them even cheaper still.
Yeah.
So it's really important.
The point that's crucial, though, is that American generics are cheaper than English generics. So as an American, it is not the case that I necessarily pay more money for my drugs. It looks that way, but only because it's a false comparison. Most drugs that people use are generics, and those generics in the United States are much cheaper than they are here in England. That is an indisputable fact.
I disagree with you. I don't think it is an indisputable fact, because actually the generics that we produce here...
I literally attended a week ago a briefing on this precise issue from people who are experts on the question of international drug pricing. What is profoundly true is that on-patent drugs are far more expensive in the US. So it's all about the mix, right? And that's what I need to know before I can evaluate this particular plan.
Is it worth...
What is the intended mix?
Well, on what Malcolm said, is it worth waiting to find out before you make accusations on the basis of political suspicion?
The government have said that the NHS is not on the table at all.
But this is negotiation. Okay. What's on the table? You can't call it a negotiation putting something on the table.
Malcolm, sorry. Yeah. They've said that they're not discussing the extension of patents. They're not discussing full access. They're not discussing the end of NICE. They're not discussing the ability through dispute settlement clauses to impose a company's profit margin against our public policy. And yet these documents show that they are discussing that. That's the key issue here. And you know, if they were simply going to say, no, we don't want to have discussions about the NHS and services that are provided through it, they didn't need 451 pages to say no.
We've got to let you go, but just one final question. Let's say in that negotiation the offer was for cheaper drugs or for cheaper patents. Would that be worth signing up to, or should we pay more expensively as we are now?
We negotiate through the health service because of the bulk purchasing power. We negotiate.
Yeah, but just ask the question: if it was a better offer,
we negotiate through the health service, through NICE, the best deals possible with the NHS.
All right.
The President has said that we are freeloading off them.
All right.
Because we have the bulk purchasing power. It's the one area where the President of the United States doesn't seem to believe in the free market.
You can't. All right.
American
I'm going to have to stop you because we've got to talk to the other parties.
Negotiate the deals that we managed to negotiate.
We've got to talk to the other parties. Can you leave me the document?
No.
Thanks.